fuel lines, hoses, and tank certification.
We're going to look at the lines, make sure they're well secured back to the tank area. And at this time, since we have a tank that's uncovered, we'll look at the tank at this time too. Many times you will not be able to have a tank uncovered because you're not required to take the covers off the tank. But you do need to make sure, for all of the things that you can see, that you have good secured lines. No lines running down between the bed and the cab on a pickup truck, for example. All the lines need to be free of kinks, any kind of damage, any kind of rubbing. And if they go through the bed floor, they need to go through a bulkhead fitting. Just a rubber grommet and the line running down through the bed, that would be an example of improper installation. And so a good bulkhead fitting that way. At this particular point, you may be able to see if the tank has a tank inspection on it because the cover's off of it. Here are some examples of some tank certificates that you might see on some tanks that are accessible. They'll be put on the tank. Either a failed tank inspection label will be on the tank, or the tank inspection, it will be good for 3 years and 36,000 miles from the indications on the tank. And this will be somewhere on the tank that will be visible. The tanks also have expiration dates, and most tanks are good for 15 years, and there are some tanks that are good for 20 years. The certifications on the tanks, and they may come in the form of a label, or the customer may have a certificate from the CSA tank inspector that shows that the tank has been inspected and it is within the 3-year, 36,000 mile window that's required.
Mounting.
Besides the obvious tank inspection that you'll be looking for, there's one other thing, safety related, that needs to be addressed at this particular point, and that is the mounting points of the brackets on the tank. They need to be secure and not loose. They need to make sure that they have bolts down through the bed, for example, on this pickup truck. No straps, no bungee cords, no loose tanks inside the bed. Those are all improper installation and rejectable items. So you need to make sure that the mounting hardware is all intact and all tight. Although this tank is secure, you want to reject when any part of the system is not securely fastened, supported, or shielded to prevent damage from road hazards if they're mounted underneath, slippage, loosening, or rotations when mounted anywhere in the vehicle. Tanks themselves, if they're mounted in a van or in an automobile, a large automobile, there are certain ways that tanks can be mounted in front or behind the drive axle. If they're located behind the drive axle, they need to be mounted from side to side in this orientation. You're not allowed to, for safety reasons, obvious safety reasons, you're not allowed to mount the tanks in a front to rear configuration behind the axle. Tanks need to be properly covered. If tanks are mounted in front of the drive axle, they are allowed to go the length of the vehicle. You need to ensure that they're properly covered and that the exhaust is at least 8 inches away and properly shielded. We look for damage in the tanks, damage in the lines, rubbing, kinking. If there's any damage to the tank, please suspend the inspection, reject the vehicle, and encourage the consumer to have the repairs made at the proper CNG mechanics.
Tank protection and shielding.
In this particular example of this vehicle, we're going to talk about the protection of the tank. It's mounted inside the vehicle, but you have the inability to be able to see the inspection date or the tank expiration date at this particular time. You're not required to take the cover off. You make every best effort to be able to find those inspections if you possibly can. Hopefully the customer will be able to give you other documentation, but you're unable to see it here. Other things, just particularly to this, as you can see, debris around the tank. This is definitely a safety related item, and this is easily removed, but you need to encourage the consumer to be able to keep these areas clean so that the tank doesn't get damaged. And this is an example of what might be very difficult to be able to see the tank. This requires a lot of disassembly time, may take as much as 5 or 10 minutes to get this cover off. And obviously you're not required to do that, and you're not able to see the tank inside the Honda. So this is an example of that.
There are two methods that may be used when checking CNG tank certification. 1. Check the CNG tank itself for a valid certification label. 2. If the inspector is unable to view the tank certification label due to disassembly requirements, the customer is required to have paperwork from a current CSA inspector indicating that the CNG tank is currently certified. Interior tank venting.
If a tank is mounted inside a vehicle, there's requirements that it vents to the outside. This is commonly done with a rubber or a plastic bag, as they call them, over all the fittings. They must encompass all the fittings, and then it must go to the outside of the vehicle so it can be safe. This bag does not feel like a Ziploc or a hefty bag. It feels more like the thickness of a carpet runner and can be made out of rubber. And it will maybe look like a bellows in some vehicles, a rubber bellows. Or this one is just made out of a very heavy plastic that resembles a carpet runner, must be secured around all of the fittings, and it must vent to the outside of the vehicle. This boot obviously has come off of its original mounting and is not providing any protection to the consumer on the inside of the vehicle. This would be a violation. When you find any kinks in the hoses or damage to the tank, such as dents that are visible, not just scratches to the paint, but actual dents in the metal component, or the wrapping that might be cut and starting to unwrap from around the tank. Deep scratches, very deep scratches where you can put your fingernail in them, and they're obviously deep that way. Or any kind of peeling that you might find in the physical wrap itself that might be around either the metal tank component or the composite tank. Those are rejectable items. This is an example on an expired tank how the wrap is starting to come undone. And this is why we have expiration dates on tanks.
In summary, as indicated previously, there are 7 items that will result in a vehicle rejection. Number 1. If a fuel leak is discovered during the inspection process, stop the inspection. Issue a rejection for the vehicle. Recommend the customer have the vehicle repaired by a certified CNG mechanic. Do not continue the inspection. Number 2. Reject when a fuel tank filler cap or cover is missing as required. Remember, certain CNG-powered vehicles incorporate the filler cap or cover into the fuel housing door to meet this requirement. Number 3. Reject a CNG vehicle when any part of the fuel system is not securely fastened, supported, or shielded to prevent damage from road hazard, slippage, loosening, or rotation. Number 4. Reject a CNG vehicle when any physical damage to a fuel system component is discovered. Number 5. Reject a vehicle that displays any installation conditions which could result in a potential hazard during a collision. Number 6. Reject a vehicle when not labeled in accordance with the National Fire Protection Pamphlet number 52. Number 7. Reject any CNG-powered vehicle when the fuel container is not current on its certification in accordance with Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 304. This states that a CNG fuel container must be re-inspected every 3 years or 36,000 miles, whichever comes first. Also, if there is evidence of a vehicle crash which might compromise any CNG system component, the vehicle shall be rejected. Above all else, the inspector's safety is of the utmost concern.